National Geographic Explorer Collection, People of the Past. Life on the Edge. You are standing on the floor of Soda Canyon in Colorado's Mesa Verde National Park. Steep, flat-topped hills called mesas surround you. It's an awesome sight. You look up ahead and see something even more astonishing. Tucked under an overhang near the top of a cliff are the ruins of an abandoned dwelling. 4 levels of stone rooms are carved into the canyon wall. A few yards away is a 600-foot drop. What a view. You've just stopped Balcony House. More than 700 years ago, about 40 people lived there. Balcony House is amazing, but it's not unique. It's one of hundreds of dwellings built into the cliffs of Mesa Verde. Most have 5 or fewer rooms, but some, like Balcony House, have many rooms and several levels. Just like today's apartment buildings, a few sites have many buildings. They look like small towns. Mesa Verde has some of the most impressive cliff dwellings in the United States. But you can find other cliff dwellings in canyon areas throughout the Four Corners. That's the region of America West, where Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona meet. Who lived in the cliffs? No one knows what these people called themselves. The Pueblo Indians, a group that lives in the area today, call them ancestral Puebloans. They think that ancient people are probably their ancestors. Some Pueblo Indian tribes tell stories that indicate their ancestors came from this area, says Larry Nordby, the head archaeologist at Mesa Verde. Also, their stone structures have a lot in common with homes many Pueblo Indians live in today, Nordby says. The building materials and methods are similar. So are some of the home's features. Moving to the cliffs. The ancestral Puebloans began settling in Mesa Verde around AD 570. For hundreds of years they lived on the tops of mesas, but around 1190 they started building dwellings in caves they found under overhangs in the cliffs. The builders used wooden beams, sandstone blocks, and mud to make walls. Archaeologists don't have a lot of evidence to explain why the ancestral Puebloans moved their homes from the top of the mesas into the cliffs. But there are several theories. The area's population had been growing. Perhaps the people moved into the cliffs to save the land above for farming. Or maybe the cliff walls and overhangs better protected the ancestral Puebloans from bad weather or attack. Life in Mesa Verde. Scientists think there must have been a good reason for the move. Climbing up and down the steep cliff walls would have been hard and dangerous. The ancestral Puebloans inched their way down by placing their fingers and feet in holes carved into the cliff. Most of the Mesa Verde dwellings are located near a round underground room called a kiva. In the floor of the kiva is the spirit hole. For ancestral Puebloans, this hole represents the opening through which the first people entered the world. In ancient times, the Puebloans gathered in kivas to talk and tell stories. They also used kivas for religious ceremonies. Today's Pueblo Indians still use kivas for many of the same things. Finding food. The 3 big crops in the Southwest were corn, beans, and squash. Nordby says we know people grew them at the Mesa Verde because they found all 3 dried and preserved by the dry climate. Archaeologists have found a rabbit and deer bones in the ancient garbage heaps. They also found broken bits of bows and arrows used to hunt the animals. Among the most common artifacts at the Mesa Verde are pieces of pottery. Some have tiny bits of pollen from wild plants clinging to them. The ancestral Puebloans ate these plants too. Other artifacts show the people were good weavers. They used yucca, a plant with long stringy leaves, to make baskets and sandals. Leaving home. Buildings stopped at the Mesa Verde around AD 1300. People may have stayed longer, yet eventually the ancestral Puebloans left their cliff dwellings in the Four Corners area. Archaeologists believe most of them headed south toward Mexico, New Mexico, and Arizona. It wasn't unusual for these people to move around, but why did they all leave? Archaeologists know that for about 30 years little rain fell in the region. This drought would have made it harder to feed people. Little by little, families may have left the area to find more food. It's important to remember, however, that the Pueblo tribes don't consider these dwellings abandoned, Nordby says. They say the spirits of their ancestors speak to them from here. Digging history. Digging History by Kid Explorer Desmond Stills, age 10. Recently, I stepped out of my car and into the past. I was able to travel 18,000 years back in time. It was a great adventure. The trip started when National Geographic Explorer asked me to be a kid explorer. They told me I would explore a historic area called Cactus Hill. You probably haven't heard of it. After all, it's hidden in a forest in Virginia. I like history, so I jumped at the chance. My mom drove me to Cactus Hill. There I met Joe McAvey. He's an archaeologist that's a scientist who studies how people lived long ago. About 30 years ago, a farmer found some spear points at Cactus Hill. People find lots of them in the area, but these are different. They looked like the famous points found near Clovis, New Mexico. The Clovis spear points are about 13,000 years old. For years, scientists thought they were made by the earliest Americans. Digging in Time. Funded by National Geographic, McAvey studied Cactus Hill. He dug trenches to look for more spear points. He found them. Something didn't seem right, however. McAvey discovered spear points that look older than the Clovis ones. He had never seen anything like them before. No one had. McAvey's spear points don't look older than Clovis points. It turns out they are older. The Cactus Hill points were made about 18,000 years ago. They are the oldest spear points ever found in the Americas. A dangerous past. Earth was an ice age 18,000 years ago. The world was cold. It was also dangerous. Many large animals lived near Cactus Hill. People there had to watch out for wolves, saber-tooths, and cave bears. They hunted deer, elk, mammoths, and mastodons. Despite danger, Cactus Hill people seemed to be doing fine. Then something happened. A big change. The climate changed, Earth got warmer, and the people of Cactus Hill disappeared. No one knows what happened to them. McAvey and other archaeologists want to solve that mystery. They are looking for other areas where the Cactus Hill people lived. Maybe they will find them one day. My walk through history was a lot of fun. I think it is pretty cool to travel in time. I hope to do it again someday. How did people get to America? They walked. That's what many archaeologists think. During the last ice age, you see, Asia and North America were connected. People probably first left Asia about 30,000 years ago. Over time, they spread across North and South America. This map shows paths that the earliest Americans may have taken. Recorded in the rings. Age records. Each year, most trees grow a new layer of wood just under the bark. These layers are called rings. Each ring includes a light band and a dark band. The light band grows in the spring, the dark band grows in the summer and fall. How many rings do you see on the tree and the stump on this page? Add 1 year for the first year of growth, the dark spot in the center, and you have the tree's age. How old is this tree when its trunk was cut? Weather records. Trees grow wider rings during wet years and narrow rings during dry years. As a result, the tree trunk becomes a kind of history book. Scientists can see patterns of dry, average, and wet years by studying the rings. Scientists don't have to cut their tree down to look at the rings. Using a special tool, they remove a small core sample, a piece of the wood in the shape of a pencil. The core sample below contains a tiny piece of each ring. Dating records. Scientists have taken core samples from many living trees at Mesa Verde. The oldest sample comes from a Douglas fir. By careful study, scientists figured out the year that each ring grew. The fir began growing in 1150, so some of the rings are older than most cliff dwellings. When scientists find a dwelling, they take core samples from the wooden beams. They compare the rings to the core samples of the Douglas fir and the other ancient trees. They look for matching patterns. Finding a match tells scientists exactly when the beamed tree grew and when it was cut down. The dwelling was probably built soon afterward.